what I was saying was we just saw Lion King. You like Lion King, guys?
Yeah.
It was cool, right? You like Lion King, Luke? Yeah. It was too fast?
And it was funny.
It was funny?
Yes.
Okay, so I came on here to talk about the prophetic stuff in Lion King and what I saw, and there's a reason why it came out right now in this time in July in the summer. It's not just about marketing, it's about what God is doing. It's about what God is raising up. And it has to do with his covenant. It has to do with his it has to do with honor. It has to do with remembering who we are. It has to do with us coming into our rulership, the scepter, the king. Who's the king? Jesus is the king. Coming into the kingdom government, kingdom perspective, right? So just to go through it real quick. So most people know the story of Lion King, but there's certain things I want to point out. So you have Simba, who as a kid, he wants to be king, but he doesn't understand what it entails. So he sees his father, and he sees the strength of his father. He sees the power and the honor that his father receives, and he wants all of that, but he doesn't really know what it takes to get that. So he's easily influenced, and he's influenced by his uncle, Scar. He's influenced by him to do things, to get him into situations that are either going to kill him or take him out the way. And that's kind of what the enemy wants to do with us. The enemy wants to kill, steal, and destroy. He wants to keep us from our inheritance, keep us from our kingship, all right? Keep us from ruling and reigning with Christ. He wants to keep us from our inheritance. Guys, be good, okay? Lukey, stop yelling. Okay, so Jakey, go back in your seat because you're messing with him.
Come on. I'm not messing with him.
Come on. We're talking about Lion King. Don't you want to hear Lion King and what Jesus is doing?
Yes.
Okay. So he gets caught up in that. And then he gets pulled into not honoring his father and listening to his father the first time when he almost gets killed by the hyenas. And then he realizes he's got to listen to his father. But then he gets fooled a different way where it's still about him trying to show his father and please his father. And so then the enemy, Scar, uses that against him. And he talks about he wants to show him his roar. And the roar has to do with praise, right? And the enemy wants to take your roar. And so that roar, it's kind of like we enter the gates with our praise. And the roar has to do with our praise. The roar has to do with devouring prey, right?
Daddy!
Jakey, give it to him.
I had this first.
Give it to him and leave him alone.
But I had this first. I found it under the chair.
Oh my gosh. So, just give it to him, Jakey. Jakey, be nice and let him have it, okay? So I can do this video. Please? Thank you. Let him have it. All right, so it's about praise, right? It's about the roar. When you step into the kingdom, into the throne room of God, and you receive from the Father, it's a pure roar. The roar is the thunder that comes from the throne room. You're bringing that into the earth. So the enemy hates that sound, right? So he takes that and he subjugates that to his own identity, to Simba's own identity. Scar, the enemy, takes that and he makes him look at that. So he puts him in a place where he's going to be, where he's vulnerable, right? In the valley where he's vulnerable. God wants us on a high place, the mountain of Zion, but the enemy puts us in a valley where we're vulnerable, right? So, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. God raises us up out of that valley.
You can't catch me.
So, he gets caught up in that. His father comes, tries to save him. It's a trick. He dies. And the whole point of that is separating the Father from our lives, separating us from the Father. And then what does Scar do? Jakey, stop. What does Scar do? He comes back. He comes back and he says, when his father is laying there dead, he says, it's your fault. He says, this wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for you. Right? So he gives him the blame. He puts the blame on him. What is the enemy? The enemy is the accuser of the brethren, right? He sets it up. He sets us up. He puts us in a place where we can be manipulated because we're young, because we don't understand. So we let the wrong things in, and then we're easily influenced, and then he turns it against us to condemn us, right? So what happens? We run into comfort. Hakuna Matata means no worries for the end of your day, right? It seems fun. It seems good to be in this place where you don't got to worry about anything. You know, you feel like you've taken the burden off of you, but you've taken the burden off of you because you've run away from who you really are. So you can never come into any authority. So what happens? Destruction happens. Destruction happens all around you, and you might not see it at first, but eventually it's going to catch up to you, right? But what happened to Simba? He was forgetting about who he really was, right? And he placed beings or people around him that were reinforcing that. So then he could stay in this place where he didn't have to deal with anything. He didn't have any responsibility. He didn't have to grow up, right? He didn't have to worry about things. That's where the enemy wants to keep us. And I'm not talking about earthly responsibility. I'm talking about heavenly responsibility, right? When the enemy comes, what do we want to do? We want to be raptured. We want to be taken out of this world. That doesn't mean we're not dealing with anything in this world, but we're not dealing with it in the right way because we don't have kingdom perspective and we can't see in the right way. So the enemy wants to take that away from us. He wants to take the rulership of heaven away from us so that we can't see, and we just want to get out because we're being oppressed, right? So then what happens is he comes back. Jakey, calm down. He comes back to the place he loves because the place he forgot about, because the one who he was going to marry, the one who he was going to love, but the one who he loved as a child, not in the same way, but he remembered. She came back. She came after him. She came searching for him. And because of that, it reminded him of who he was, but he didn't want to have anything to do with it because he was stuck in his hurt. He was stuck in the condemnation and the regret of what he went through, the loss of what he went through. So it kept him from wanting to go back, to take his throne, to sit at the right hand of the Father, right? To take his throne. So then he went and he eventually saw the monkey, and the monkey, he looked into the water and he realized he saw his father. He looked at the reflection and he saw his father. And then what happens is the lightning and the clouds come, right? The lightning and the clouds come. That's the throne room of God. That's transition right there. That's how God transitions things in the Bible all the time. It's through the lightning It's through the wind. It's through the storm. Right? Jakey, calm down, please. Okay. It's through the storm. So then he sees his father in the lightning and the clouds and the rolling storm that's in the distance. And he hears his father's voice. And he remembers. And what does his father say? Remember. Remember. Remember who you are. That's so prophetic. Because God brings us to a place of zakar. Zakar is remember in Hebrew. Right? He brings us to a place of zakar. Zakar is the Hebrew word for remember. And it's the number 11. It's the 2 becoming 1. It's the number 11. It's the 2 becoming 1. Right? What is the 2 becoming 1? It's my mind being changed into the mind of Christ. It's the 2 becoming 1. So, but also remembering has to do with a place of meeting. It's a place of meeting. Who are you meeting with? Lukey, please calm down. It's you're meeting with the Father, right? So, Zakar, first word, Zion. Zayin or Zion, I'm not the best at pronouncing the Hebrew, but Zayin, which is the scepter, and it's the weapon of the king, the scepter of the king, right? It has to do with being crowned. Zion. Then you have the Kaf, right? Which is the number 20. And it has to do with a covering. It has to do with the covering, being covered by the hand of God.
What?
And then you have. So Zion is number 7, just by the way. But then you have Resh, right? And Resh is the number 200.
What? You want me to have it?
So you have Resh means to bow your head, to humble yourself, to bow your head. So you're bowing your head before the king who covers you. Lukey, stop it. Jakey,
what's your car?
Give it to him. So you're bowing your head before
Daddy.
the king who covers you, right? You're humbling yourself. It's the meeting place. Every time we speak from heaven, we're speaking, it's a meeting place. It's a place where you can meet with God. You can humble yourself before the throne and you're given access to the way. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Well, the way is that place where you have the sacrifice. The sacrifice is put on the altar in the Old Testament. The sacrifice is put on the altar and it's burned up by his flame, right? By his flame. Not our flame, his flame. It's also called the table of the Lord. It's a place where he consumes what we give as a sacrifice. And the thing that we need to give up is our own ways. And then he takes them and he transforms them into his ways. But he needs something for you to give up. He needs something for you to give. So when we humble ourselves, we say, not our ways, but your ways. And he remembers us and we come into covenant with him there. Right? And that's where we get our strength. The joy of the Lord is our strength. And it's funny because Simba's name is Strength. So we won't enter into his joy until we humble ourselves. And then we come into a place of covenant and we remember him. Covenant has to do with promise. We come back to the place of promise, right? So then the rain comes. What's up, Simone? How you doing? So then the rain comes, right? So when he went, so powerful because so he goes back to Simba goes back to come against Scar. And in the midst of Scar trying to get the upper hand by bringing him back to the place where he was manipulated, right? To take him back, that's an entrance that the enemy has in you, right? Then what happens? The lightning comes. The throne room judgment or justice comes in. And it brings in a flame and the tree burns, right? So that lightning comes from heaven, burns up what's going on with Simba that he was holding on to, that kept him separated from his promise, right? Kept him separated from his promise. So the lightning comes, it burns up in the midst of the fire. He's hanging on by the edge. He's about ready to die, right? But then it gets burned up because the truth is revealed. And then he raises up and he takes his place, and a fight ensues, and eventually he takes his place. And who falls into the smoke and the fire? Scar does. And Scar gets destroyed by the very thing that he tried to use against his enemies, right? And that's what happens to the enemy, and that's what's going to happen to the enemy right now. Sevenfold. That's 7, the number 7. Sevenfold comes back onto the enemy. Everything that God does, everything that the enemy does, God's going to hit him sevenfold. But we got to come before the throne of grace. We got to come boldly. See, Simba did not come boldly before the throne of grace. You're a little stinker. Because Simba didn't come before the throne of grace. Why? Because he couldn't see it. Because he was caught up in his own identity. He was caught up in himself because of the enemy. It was an enemy tactic. It was an enemy plan. So then that goes away. God takes it away because Simba goes into his destiny. He goes into his destiny. And as he goes into his destiny, he finds out who he really is. He doesn't fully know. When he meets with the Father, he doesn't fully know. He's got to walk it out. And as he walks it out, God cleanses him, right? God destroys. He burns up the thing that was keeping him insecure as he walks it out, as he goes into it. And that's the thing that God does with us. And that's the beauty of his life and the beauty of his rainbow that comes after the rain comes. And you get tickled after the rain comes, because the rain brings transition, rebirth. What was it doing? After that all happened, the rain came into the land, and the land is becoming reborn. The land's becoming reborn, right? It's a mitzvah in Hebrew. It has to do with the Tav, the last letter of the alphabet. Jesus said, I am the Aleph and the Tav. Jakey, you're playing too much. It's so funny. So Jesus said, I am the Aleph and the Tav has to do with covenant. It has to do with us being marked. Marked. We're marked. What are we marked with? We're marked with his mark, right? We come into his glory. We come into his justification. Okay? So God justifies us. God gives us authority in our lives. And that's what he's doing right now. He's bringing back our authority. He's bringing back our image of who we are. Yeah, we're going to have to fight and move forward. But through it, he justifies us. In the Bible, it's always about remembering. He always remembers. He always occurs with us, remembers with us. He takes that which he did in the beginning and brings it back to where we are in the present. You know, in Ephesians where it says, remember your first love. He takes back the passion that you had and brings it back into the present when we humble ourselves. Every time we have to humble ourselves. And he brings back that thing. He remembers it. He rejoins us together. He brings back his promise, his covenant with us, and strengthens it. The joy of the Lord is our strength. He strengthens it. He Simbas it. He strengthens it. And it's so powerful. All right? It's so powerful to know who God is. Really, truly. Because if you see the Son, you see the Father. It's so powerful to know who Christ is. To know the image of Christ, the image of the King, the image of strength. To see the true King upon his throne. and to enter into what he's already done for us. Right? To see the image of who he really is, not the image of what the enemy tried to subjugate so that we won't enter into his truth, to keep us separated from us, to feel like we can't be a part of it, really. Like Simba. But Jesus came to bridge that gap. He's the lover of our souls. He's the lover of our souls. He wants to reach in and pull out the gems in our life that we don't even know are there. So that's all I wanted to say. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I got my kids in the back and they're loud. Say bye.
Bye. Bye.
See you later.
Bye. See you later.
Layla's playing by herself. What are you doing, Layla? Say see ya.
See ya. Now scream for me.
Now it's funny because if you meet him in person, this kid is so shy, but now he's so loud and annoying his dad. But, alright guys, thanks for listening. Bye. Good to see you.